Hey guys, Crave here. And it's a follow-up video for Warframe, this time for the impressions upload I did about a week ago. Now, it's really been a fun game so far. Like I said in my first impression video, while it is addicting, it's one of those games that you can basically sort of not play for a bit, especially if you're crafting some really important items. You can just check back in for some short missions that you need. But yeah, I'll be going through that a bit later. But for this video, the focus is on what are the things you need to know in your first few hours or days of playing the game. There are so many things to consider, as I found out in my first week. Now, this is really just true for so many number of games. Now, if you found this upload by accident, I recommend checking out my Warframe overview upload to get a quick feel of what the game is like and some things you can expect early on. Now, this video will focus on four major aspects which I think are important for new players, and we'll start off with frames and weapons. As with most of my guides, you can also click on the area you want to focus on. Now, the start of the game has you choosing one of three frames. As I mentioned in my overview upload, you can choose any of the armor types and it won't stop you from progressing. Also, the early tutorial will have you choose the weapons you want to equip, and again, you can choose any to get started. However, there are considerations on the choice of frame and weapon types. Now, the frames and weapons have key differences that will have to match, well, your gameplay preference and the look you want to get. Now, I picked Volt because he has this AoE damage ability with a stun effect to go with it. Now, this makes it easier to get through the different mobs early on. Now, the Mag frame was a very close second pick, mainly because her first ability is also AoE damage, and if, those mobs survive, it allows you to bring those pesky ranged mobs closer for the kill. Now, both Volt and Mag are squishy frames, and it's really the proper use of their abilities that helps you manage. If you prefer a tougher frame to start with, then you should go with Excalibur. He has this strong focus on melee attacks and higher armor, which fares better compared to Volt and Mag's sub 100 numbers. This means that even if his shields deplete, mobs would still have to consider his innate ability to take on more damage. Now, in terms of the weapons, all of them will be and should be replaced via crafting or buying stuff from the market. Still, picking out the right one for your needs in the first few playthroughs is very important. Warframe has three weapon types to consider: primary, which is your main ranged weapon; secondary, which is your sidearm; and of course your melee weapon. Now, the primary has you choosing between a rifle and a bow, and I mentioned this one in my overview upload, that bows have a stealth component, but they also have a chance to one-shot most mobs when they're charged up. So basically, either rifle or bow will be fine, but it will just depend on your preferred style and if you do like the idea of having a projectile when using a bow. Now, for your sidearm, it will depend on whether you want a pistol or a throwing knife. So the knives have a stealth component, which means it allows you to attack things like security cameras without the weapon-generated noise. Now, it's important to note that if you don't kill a mob outright with your stealth weapon like your bow, the target will go into an alerted state, which can then call on other mobs' attention. You do have, and I don't know the exact timing for it, but I think you do have a little over a second to quickly down the target before that happens. So it normally means a quick shot right after a charged bow shot. For your melee weapon, it won't matter, but the Scanna does have high attack speed, while the Staff has the advantage of being good at multiple melee mobs. Now, both weapons are capable of instant stealth kills on weaker mobs if you can successfully pull it off. Now, the mid and long-term choices for frames and weapons will depend on your playstyle and abilities you prefer to use. You will eventually craft other frames or enhance your existing one in the long run. Now, all three starter frames are fine, then there'll be varying opinions, but you'll also have to consider which is fun for you. Now, there are some weapon types and damage types that complement certain armor types, but there are also frames that can work with any type of weapon. So I recently crafted the Rhino Warframe, and was thinking of good weapons to go with it. But after all the research and and thinking about it, as it turns out, it's one of those frames that can go with many different weapon types. So keep that in mind in case you want to consider weapon and armor synergy. Overall, when you bring in your crafted frames into consideration, you might want to think of things this way. Your choice of armor will often depend on the mission, and your choice of weapon depends on the stuff you have to kill. Now, it's Well, it's very generalized, but true in many different ways. Now, as an example for frame choice, I often see people running the Frost suit for defense missions mainly because of the Frost Globe ability. Now, it basically just protects the mission objective from damage. Now, still, it doesn't mean that you have to run with the Frost suit or that frame for defense type objectives. Many other frames are also good for these types of missions. Related to weapons are the damage types in the game. Now, as you get more rank and mastery in the game, it has intricacies and it will evolve, but let's stick with the basic information first. You have two main damage types in the game, that's physical and elemental. Now, physical damage is then divided into impact, which very much affects shields, puncture, which greatly affects armor, and slash, which has improved effect on organics or fleshy targets. Now, elemental damage has four parts, which are heat, which has more effect on fleshy targets, cold, which slows down your enemies, electricity, which can then stun, and toxin, which directly affects target health and has, I think, a damage over time effect to it. Now, as you get deeper into the game, you'll find there are also combination types of elemental damage, but that's in the mid and long term. Now, all these damage types have to be considered depending on the enemies you face. The first few enemies you'll go up against are the Grenier, Corpus, and Infested. So, just as an example, you might want to carry around a puncture weapon for the Grenier, an impact weapon for, or an impact and electricity-based weapon for the Corpus faction, and maybe lug around stuff with heat and slash damage for infested targets. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you will have to acquire other gear types to better handle different situations and mobs. Not all of these damage types have a chance to proc or apply status effects. That will be something like the stun effect that goes with electricity damage. Now, when you're considering building other weapons, check on the status values to better understand how much you're getting out of an item. Now, most Warframe abilities have a 100% chance to proc or apply related status effects, while weapons will only have a chance on hit to apply the same effect. So while, let's say, Volt's, what's his ability, his shock ability has a surefire chance to stun, weapons with electricity damage may only have a percentage chance to apply the status effect. So you will need mods, as you progress in the game, you will need mods to eventually improve your chance to apply these effects. Now, you can think that maybe, what's going on inside your head is that damage is damage, even if other types are more effective compared to the others. In the long term, however, you have to be efficient and choose the loadout that best fits a mission type that you're going through. Now that you have an idea of your frames and weapons, let's talk about leveling them, or more properly called in this game as increasing their ranks. Now, frames with higher ranks will have access to other abilities and eventually increase shield and health values. For the weapons, don't spend too much time on your starter gear, get a hold of some better ones, especially the non-MK1 versions at least. Now, gaining ranks is based on kills, missions, and affinity drops. Now, every Warframe and weapon has its own rank. There are specifics to this, but it's important to note that most things you do in-game will net you some affinity. Now, this all then totals up to your profile mastery, which is your rank as a player, regardless of the frame and weapons you are using. Now, being grouped up with other players basically gains you the same amount of affinity, provided you are within range when the kill is done. So missions also sometimes have the specific affinity side objectives when you start one up. So you can basically see that at the bottom of your screen or when you hit the escape key if you're on a PC while you're in a mission. Now you can get some objectives of this sort like, kill 30 mobs using your rifle or using your Warframe ability 5 times and so forth. So pay attention to those, especially if you have a shiny new Warframe or a shotgun or some weapon that you want to rank up. Now, and if it is a new item you're trying to rank up, it's easier to farm lower level areas or stick with a group that's also farming affinity. Now, as your rank and mastery increases, you gain access to more quests, which are pretty standard but interesting nonetheless, well, if it's the first time you go through them. You will also unlock modification or mod slots for your gear and frame. Now, this is a very important aspect as it further increases the potential of your weapons and armor. Mods can then range from increasing your Warframe abilities power to increasing your health and things like that. Weapon modifications vary from increasing chances to apply status effects like electricity stuns or increasing the chance to crit strike. Now, these mods are basically drops from mobs and come from mission rewards and eventually can be crafted as you advance further into the game. Polarity is another concept that's important and is found in the upper right part of a mod card or the mod slot. Now, this affects the allocation number of mods you can fit into a weapon or a frame. Now, just keeping it basic, matching polarities means that it will result in freeing up more allocation slots for other card mods, while the opposite reduces that number. So later in the game, or if you have some platinum on you, you will eventually have the option to modify polarities, but again, that's later on. Now, I have to emphasize the importance of these mods as they will very much affect your gameplay, especially when more allocation slots are available and when you have more higher tiers of mods. Now, you will find it easier to manage certain situations and mow down mobs as you get more ranks. They will also affect how your frame behaves and your weapons work. So for example, a mod can give your frame vitality regen, while another mod for your weapon can also add a combo move to your sword, or whichever weapon that mod will affect. Finally, a big part of the game is crafting gear and purchasing component blueprints from the market. Now, yes, there are items that allow you to purchase stuff with real currency, and yes, they do allow the purchase of frames and some weapons, but many of the important ones are really locked off until you get or gain some mastery of the game. Now, the currency you get in-game for your real money is called platinum, and I've gotten a decent amount of it only when I'm lucky enough to get a sizable discount from the first login of each day. Now, these daily rewards are pretty random, but yeah, if I do get a sizable discount or a noticeable or significant discount, yeah, I do think about purchasing platinum. Now, it's also for me to show support for the devs for the game they have right now, which is really good. Now, you can use plat, use plat to purchase some hard to find components, which is what I've done in some situations, or you can also purchase some pretty cool cosmetic items. Still, it's not a bad thing to completely just base your purchases from in-game credits and drops. Now, credits and crafting components are very important things to accumulate as you progress in the game. Now, you have some basic things to get started with for your crafting, but you'll find yourself quickly limited in terms of the resources you have on hand early on. Now, it's important that you loot all containers you can for the component items you will need while you are in missions. Now, specific planets will have chances of dropping some sort of resource, and you can see that in the star map when you sort of hover above each planet, and that's where you may want to spend your time or focus on at the beginning stages of the game. So just keep accumulating and running those missions for the resources you need. Credits are also very important as blueprints have an attached credit and crafting cost. Now, missions do net a good amount of this, but you should also watch out for alerts as they net you additional credits on top of what you would normally get from a normal run. Now, some alerts also require you to run them a few times to get the actual credit bonus, or sometimes there is an attached rare resource bonus. You'll find that even public groupings will be fine as everyone nearly has the same objective in mind, although public groups tend to go faster than when you run solo or when you run with friends, and you might not get the chance to loot all containers. But yeah, it's also good, especially if you are just after the bonus credit or bonus resource. Now, you can also check trade chat or clan chat if they can help you find some of the items you need, although there might be a particular price attached to it. Of course, that's normal. And also, you can do this if you'd like to rush resource accumulation for a bit. Once you start accumulating credits and resources, you'll find yourself, basically eyeing more and more frames and weapons. Now, it's going to be a pattern. You sort of purchase the blueprint or check the blueprint and then get the required stuff. So for example, the Rhino Warframe component drops off Jackal, which is the last boss in the Venus system. Now, what happens is that basically after completing all the missions in the system, you can then farm the last boss. In this case, for the Rhino Warframe, it's Jackal for the components. Now, there is one other component that you will need for just for this example, that's the Oricon cell, and that component, if you decide to farm it, comes from Saturn. I believe that's Saturn, yeah. And but yeah, in my case, since it was my second frame after Nyx, I think that's why that's where I spent my plat on. Anyway, once you have all the required materials, you can then craft them in your foundry and wait. Now, frames will normally take longer to craft compared to weapons, but it's really still nice. I mean, the mere fact that you can build any frame or weapon that you need, even without real money, is great. Now, the wait time is fine mainly because everything, again, as I said, is still free. So you can do other things while waiting. Or like me, I log into other games, but I always check back into Warframe for maybe alert missions. And there you have it, the four major things that I think are important as you ease your way into this game. So of course there are other aspects like sentinels, the Kubro pet, or types of attacks that you can do like spin attacks, well, other stuff, but you'll eventually know more about it as you progress. I think you'll find deeper satisfaction if you learn about the many other aspects of the game on your own. So if you're new to this game, I hope you found this useful. If you did, leave a thumbs up on your way out and subscribe for more content from me. I'll talk to you soon.